Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Welcome to episode 41 of the Terrible Book Club. This time, it's a Patron's Choice episode.
Patron's Choice. Patron's Choice. That's my radio guy voice trying to add some sound effects here. I'm Chris, by the way.
Clearly we need more patrons for a bigger sound effect budget since...
That's where your money's going.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm Paris, and that is the aforementioned Chris, and we read Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. This was a selection made by our lovely patron Veronica. Thanks, Veronica, for the suggestion. Hopefully this review, I guess, is what you're looking for.
Yeah, this was an interesting one for sure. I don't think this is really a laughy episode so much as a thinky one, actually.
Yeah, I think right up at the top, we should probably do a content warning. So, we've been real terrible about doing that. In fact, we've never done a content warning.
I think we've given general warnings before about content, but maybe not directly up front.
Yeah.
Or,
so this
maybe
time,
after we started talking about something.
Yeah. So we're trying to be a little better about that. So just so you know, this episode is going to discuss. It's going to discuss and include descriptions of sexual assault, violence, and eating and exercising disorders. So, be forewarned, do not pass if any of those things are a problem for you specifically.
Yeah, take care of yourself, please.
Yeah. So, we're going to treat them... We're not going to be assholes, but, we're going to talk about those things. So, if you don't want to hear about that stuff, then don't listen.
Maybe being an asshole is in the spirit of this book, though, because boy,
oh
boy.
True. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read the summary, the synopsis of the book that we've read for today's episode. So once again, this is Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. Her perfect life is a perfect lie. As a teenager at the prestigious Bradley School, Ani Finelli endured a shocking public humiliation that left her desperate to reinvent herself. Now, with a glamorous job, expensive wardrobe, and handsome blue-blood fiancé, she's this close to living the perfect life she's worked so hard to achieve. But Ani has a secret. There's something else buried in her past that still haunts her. Something private and painful that threatens to bubble to the surface and destroy everything. With a singular voice and twists you won't see coming, Luckiest Girl Alive explores the unbearable pressure that so many women feel to, quote, have it all, and introduces a heroine whose sharp edges and cutthroat ambition have been protecting a scandalous truth, and a heart that's bigger than it first appears. The question remains, will breaking her silence destroy all that she has worked for? Or will it at long last set Ani free? All right.
That seems like a story that could be maybe interesting.
So personally, I have zero interest in a book like this, so I was already just ready to be disappointed. I'm not
What makes it definitely uninteresting for you?
I'm just not into books about some lady's life. I don't know, hey,
yeah,
I had
fuck autobiographies of Marie Curie or Amelia Earhart.
No. You know what I mean? I'm... Okay, so this book reminded me of Confessions of a Shopaholic, and that's the kind of book I don't like. Books that focus on women or people, I mean, it doesn't have to be a woman, but, people who I have nothing in common with and would really not... I don't care about designer handbags and shit, and, this lady in this book is very similar to the main character from... Confessions of a Shopaholic, where all she does is drop brand names all the time, and I just it's just you know how when you used to have regular TV before everything was digital, and you just get these static masses of static. Like sometimes they were different colored.
Sure.
That's kind of what this book felt like when she was talking about brands. I was just like, okay.
You just felt the fuzz coming in from the sides of like your perception.
Yeah, it was just like
blacking out.
it was like everything just went fuzzy, and I was like, whatever, and I just skipped until I got to something of substance, and that happened
something
a lot.
that wasn't capitalized with an Italian name of some kind.
Oh god, I just like I mean, I guess that's revealing as to how distanced I am from I guess the audience of this book. This book was not written for me, I guess is the point I'm making.
But I don't think that stuff is like the main. It's definitely like front loaded with that kind of a thing, and it's, you know, continues throughout the book for the most part, but
yeah,
that's really not the main focus of what's being explored here. I would say it's like a side effect of who the main character is, and boy oh boy is this a main character that I think perhaps, I don't know how many people would identify with her.
Yeah, that's the thing for me about this book that makes it terrible in my mind, I guess, is that the main character is not likable. The character even, you know, there's a page early on in the book that says, like, I'm not your plucky heroine, and I mean, that is true, but I think, so in my mind, I was thinking that this book was going to be like, oh, you know, I'm damaged, but I'm still lovable, I'm still a person. But, like, that's not what happens at all. Like, this person is damaged and a fuckhead is kind of the best way I can put it. The
Definitely
main character is a
not
jerk.
a nice person, someone I would not want to hang around for long. Her internal monologue is just complete assholery to everyone around her, obsessed with her station in life and status and how she's perceived by others on an almost paranoid level.
Yes.
To the point where every decision she makes is sort of informed by, well, what will it look like to others? Am I going to have the sense of status over them that I need?
And I mean, I certainly, you know, as a woman in my 20s, like, I totally feel some of the same anxieties about life, but like not in this way or at this level, and I really hope that no one feels these things at this level, because this seemed like a cartoonish level of anxiety about these things. I don't know.
Up front, she really reads like a Lady Patrick Bateman. Like the first 50 to 100 pages of the book.
Patrice Batewoman.
Exactly.
Batewoman.
She has a really like sociopathic vibe about her and how she views like everyone around her. She's always judging clothes and appearances. There's like interns that come in to interview for jobs, and they're just like, you know, try to get a spot somewhere, and she sees through all their bullshit. Oh, your dad helped you out to get this interview, didn't he? You're just one of these same 23-year-old girls that come through these doors all the time at the Women's Magazine, which is a shitty name for a magazine. By the way.
Yeah, so Ani in her adult life works at the Women's Magazine, which, as Chris pointed out, is like the stupidest name. Like, you couldn't come up with anything else. You couldn't have called it, I don't know, Pink, fucking anything kind of obvious and feminine that isn't just literally the magazine for females.
Buy this if you have female parts.
Yeah,
it's for women's.
It's real dumb. It's supposed to be an analog for Cosmo, right?
Yes.
Is it even called Cosmopolitan, or is it just Cosmo? I don't even know.
It's I think it's just Cosmo now.
Oh, fuck. All right. Well, it's supposed to be an analog for Cosmo. And in fact, this character, Ani Finelli, she's really kind of an analog of the author herself, Jessica Knoll.
That's not what the author says, though.
Yeah, the author says that, oh, you know, we have some things in common, but, like, we're really not that similar. And I beg to differ. I'm not gonna go into, like, my laundry list, my crazy, like, rabbit hole I went down, but there are interviews she's given where she mentions things in her life that are literally mirrored word for word in the book. Like, for example, she gave an interview about her anxiety about her wedding day and like getting skinny for her wedding and stuff, and she mentions the exact diet that someone suggests to the main character in the book, and talks, and it's like the same weight and everything like that she's going for at the time for her wedding that Ani is in the book, and it's like she describes the same kind of anxieties and neuroses of anorexia and then like binge eating and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure you are, Ani. Like, I'm pretty sure.
There's a whole like 5-page rebuttal of that idea in the back of the book, which seems a little defensive to me, especially when the points that she makes as to why she is not one-to-one with this character. She says that she understands this character, and that's where she's coming from, but that like, oh, well, Tiffany wouldn't get married in Jersey like I did, so clearly we're different people entirely.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really hold so much water when, like, the whole crux of why the protagonist is like she is in the book is pretty... It seems like exactly what happened to you at some point. Well, half of the things that happened. There's a back half here of shitty shit that happens to Tiffany, the main character.
Well,
it's
Tiffany. Yeah, Tiffany. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that like when the book was initially published, the author wanted to distance herself from the character because she was, at the time, she was denying that she had ever been sexually assaulted. But in reality, the sexual assault that occurs in the book to the main character actually happened to Jessica Knoll. But like, I don't know, a year and a half after the book came out, Jessica Knoll was like, all right, jig's up. Yeah, I did get raped. It is like a representation of the rape that occurred to me as a kid. And so I understand initially why she was like, oh, we're nothing alike. No, why would we ever be similar? Definitely not. Yes, I'm going to go out this door now. See you later. Like, I get that she was, trying to, avoid anyone asking about whether the rape was reflective of something that really happened, but she finally came to terms with it and talked about it, which, is a really tough thing to do. Like, I totally understand why you would not want to admit that happened or make accusations or whatever, because, I mean, we're not going to get into it, but like, look at the Supreme Court shit that's going on right now. Just saying. Yeah,
like, kind of bizarrely similar situations that are being brought up here. So,
Yeah, also, like...
What a timely read by us.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump is, has also been accused of rape, sexual assault, misconduct, and all those things. But the Kavanaugh stuff is, like Chris said, like, super timely and, like, weird that these things happened sort of at the same time. So... In a world where claiming, where saying that somebody raped you can end your life, end a peaceful life for you anyway, it's really tough to do that. So yeah, like, props to Jessica Knoll for like talking about it and saying, hey, you know what, this did happen. Like, fuck those people, whatever. I don't think she pressed charges or anything, because, like, statute of limitations and all that, which is a stupid thing, but moving on. But, like, even after she said, hey, the sexual assault that happens in the book really did happen to me, I don't know, it still seems like she's still trying to be like, oh, no, the main character isn't me, but I just feel like there's so much evidence saying that it's so similar to her that I really think that
they both experienced this horrible trauma. They both are writers at popular magazines for women in New York.
Yep.
They both lived in like literally the same areas in the book.
Yeah, like
down to the college being named after the county she was from.
Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, and she went to a high school prep school in the same. Like, she went to a prep school just like Ani did. The rape occurred basically just like it did in the book, almost exactly, from what she's said in interviews. And the same thing happened, like, and so I don't know, there are just a lot of similarities. I guess we don't have to sit here and list them all, but yeah. I do think it's really, I guess I just wanted to bring this up because it's like, I just want more from authors. Like, I don't want their autobiography in a fictional lens. Like, I totally understand that for some people, if they've been through trauma, writing something like this is kind of like therapy for them. Like, they want to get it out. Maybe they don't want to make big sweeping accusations, so this is how they do it. And like, I can understand that. But if you're like, I want to be an author, like, I want to write an original story, man, like, add a fucking magical cat on a flying carpet. Like do something. Like, I don't.
She did. There were things that made the trauma worse that she added to the main character's life. So that's definitely a big difference. But at the same time, I feel like the whole discussion or theme in this book is like Tiffany is a massive jerk to like pretty much everyone around her. She even like her husband or her fiance rather, she's not totally in love with this dude. She might have been at one point, but she's only marrying him for literally the protection that his status and money offers her. She says it to herself multiple times throughout the book, and like a couple of times to others. Like she has a friend named Nell that I think she mentions it to, just like straight out.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, like, I just want to read something that isn't it's not just you know, write what you know. Like, I just think that phrase has kind of been taken too far by a lot of writers, and I mean, obviously, you know, it's difficult to write about something that you've never experienced, but like you can write about something you've experienced, but like still change it enough that it's not just your life in a different shade of blue, you know, like I don't know. I just I'm
kind of mixed on this, especially considering how this book you know, sorted itself out towards the end, which I guess we should actually talk about the plot of this book, since we've been kind of talking about the background and setting more than anything.
Yeah,
right now.
I mean, so it's pretty obvious that, you know, even just with in the synopsis, it's like, oh, Ani endured a shocking public humiliation that left her desperate to reinvent herself, and it's like, well, for most women, that's a sexual assault. Like, it's no surprise, really. But that actually isn't what it was, right? Like, that was the other bad thing that happens. So Tiffany, I don't know. Tiffany grows up in this suburb in Pennsylvania, and she goes to his regular school, gets kicked out for smoking pot, and gets sent to this like prestigious prep school instead, where they're supposed to, you know, like fix her or whatever. And she struggles with a lot of things that most women struggle with, like body image issues and weight issues. Being popular, having friends.
She's super concerned, like, the first day of school, and is, like, reading the tables around her for who's the top of the pecking order and who she should be going for to make friends with, and who's got the nicest bag or clothes or something, or makeup, or even anything like that. She judges people on their appearances, like, straight out the gate, and like, there's even one character that I don't even remember her name, because her name's mentioned once, and then she's called the Shark for the rest of the book, because her eyes are kind of set a little bit apart. And this is super indicative of Tiffany's character from the start. She's like, even before, I guess, a lot of these traumatic experiences happen, she's a jerk, and she reduces everyone around her to like status and perception.
Yeah.
And she does that through the whole book. Even towards the end, I think she's supposed to have set herself free of some things by the end, but I really don't see that as what ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of the problem I have with the book, is that it really feels like, even from the sentence in the synopsis that's like, you know, it explores this and this, and then it reveals that she has a heart that's bigger than it first appears, but like, it doesn't show that at all. As Chris pointed out, it shows you Patrice Batewoman, a sociopathic monster who is the American Psycho. Like,
there's another scene up front at the top of the book that's very indicative of this. She's heading in to interview some like intern person for some job at the women's magazine, not Cosmo.
Yeah.
And she brings this interviewee. She does this tactic apparently with all of her interviews. She brings them to, like, a lady that serves coffee in the lobby of the building that the magazine is in, who has, like, a bunch of facial scarring from burns all over her face. Yeah. And then she judges that person based on how they interact with this burned lady who serves coffee. And if they, like, say something shitty to her afterwards, she definitely doesn't hire them. And so I kind of understand, like, oh, you don't want to hire anyone that's shitty to someone with deformities or disabilities. But at the same time, you're still using that person as a prop in your life to judge others by, which feels like a super icky use of another human being. Especially when this person is never mentioned again throughout the rest of the book, and Tiffany's only use for her is as this sort of judgment mechanism for other people that are walking through the door. And she does find some shitty people, and she doesn't give them the job. But so you're an asshole too, just like a slightly better asshole?
Yeah, she's terrible. I mean, I need to find a good passage to read, but everything she does is like, she doesn't exist like a normal person does. And I think she really is a sociopath. And I think that's the best way to put it. Not like, you know how when you kind of get up in the morning and like go make coffee and maybe get dressed and like go to work, like, you have some thoughts that cross your mind, like maybe you have something important to do that day, but you don't get out of bed and immediately go, oh, and now I have to walk quietly out of the room not to wake my fiancé so he doesn't know I'm eating a bag of chips before work, and then I have to dispose of the chip bag in a secret way, and then I have to go out for my 2 hours of cardio before work, because if I don't, I'll be fat, and then I have to like...
Also, I have to show up everyone at the cardio classes to make sure I'm the one the teacher thinks is the greatest at the cardio stuff, just for reasons, just because there are other women around me that I have to be better than.
Yep, and like, it's just a constant stream of these really crazy kind of thoughts. When, like Chris was saying, when she's at her bar class or Pilates or I don't know, one of those like rich white lady things that they do, that she pays $325 a month for, she's like, I can't give up. I have to do all of the repetitions. Like, I have to do them the best, and because I want the teacher to like me, and the teacher of course does. He's like, well, you did a really good job, and she's just like, heh, yeah, that's right.
I've got one over on the rest of them bitches in there.
And somebody says like, oh, nice job to her, like somebody else in the class, and she goes, oh, I'm sorry, what? And she goes, but I did hear her. And she just wanted her to like repeat it so she could hear it again.
The tiniest, pettiest shit in the world. She will just... There's no level too, like, unpetty for her to not do, I guess, or something.
Yeah, like, I think... So this kind of person is the exact opposite of the person that I wanted to be when I was younger. And it's the same now. Like, this is the exact opposite of the person that I would want to be. I do not want to be a sociopathic, anorexic weirdo who obsesses over things and is marrying someone just for their money and obsessively buys handbags and shoes that are worth thousands of dollars just because everyone else is. I mean, it's just not something that I aspire to.
Yeah, while you're mentioning that, can I mention the use at one point when they're like, Tiffany is with Nell and a couple of other bitchy lady friends, because you have to have a gaggle of like very judgy lady friends, so you're all Sex in the City like or something to try out your wedding dress. Anyway, when she's there, they use the phrase "go ano" to talk about like dieting for a wedding, which is some just horrendous shit. It like, as soon as I read that, I was like, wow, you really, you don't think about how things sound, I guess.
Yeah. I have the line. I can read it to you.
Oh, good.
So what's the problem? Nell's brow would have furrowed if not for the Botox. Preventative, she'd said defensively. The problem is that I've been eating like a beast. I have to go ano now if I want to be ready by September 4th. Ani, hands on 32-inch hips, Nell said. Stop. You are so tiny right now. Nell would kill herself if she was ever this tiny. You should do the Dukin diet, Moni chimed in. My sister did it before her wedding. She snapped her fingers. Dropped 8 pounds in 3 weeks, and she was already a 2. That's the diet Kate Middleton used, Love Bracelet said, and we all acknowledged the Duchess of Cambridge with a moment of silence. Kate Middleton looked so hungry on her wedding day, it had to be commended. Yeah.
That's a lot of the conversations between women in this book.
This is why I can't stand this book. It's so inane. Ugh.
A lot of the time, Tiffany in her head is like, these inane bitches, they don't see, it's all just a bullshit veneer that they're hiding behind. It's like, but so are you doing the same thing, and you're judging everyone else around you for caring about that stuff, but not as much as you or something? It's
crazy that she's doing all this shit. All the same shit, saying all the same shit, and like eating up all the same like stupid imaginary rules, but yeah, then criticizes everyone for doing the same thing. Oh, sorry, I found the note. So after the sentence that says I have to go ano now if I want to be ready by September 4th, I made a note in the Kindle document, and my note was, I want to throw my Kindle through a fucking window, is what I wrote, because I was like, I can't take this. It's so terrible. And I know that the author is trying to show us that neurosis, of this obsession with these thoughts and status and stuff, but it's real hard to read if you're not that kind of a person, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the main challenge of this book is that Tiffany kind of is this horrible person, and she's experienced some horrible trauma that she perhaps uses this prickly or sharp-edged, as the back of the book puts it, personality to sort of protect herself from things, as well as like the status and power stuff. And I think the central, I guess, challenge here is like, is that justified because she's self-aware of like why she's shitty? Maybe does that give her any leeway of it? Because she seems sort of self-understanding. So I think maybe this is a good time to kind of go through a plot synopsis here of like the things that happened, and we can have a further discussion of her character after that. Since we kind of need all the context.
So like I said, she grows up in this town in Pennsylvania. She gets kicked out of a regular school, ends up at this prep school. At the prep school, like I said, she's struggling with body image, weight issues, regular kind of 13-year-old girl stuff. Tries to get in with the popular kids. I don't know. She starts lying to people so that they think she's cooler. Like, she pretends, like, on the first day of school, the teacher is like, hey, what did we all do this summer? Let's all share. And they go around the room, and she, instead of saying the truth, which was just that she read a lot of books and tanned in her yard, she didn't really go anywhere, she says, oh, I went to the Pearl Jam concert on this date or whatever. And everybody was like, oh, that's so cool, and like, yeah. She's like proud of herself for lying. And that's one of the things you see that kind of sets her on that path of like, well, if I just pretend, then people will like me. And that theme is replicated as the book goes on. And then eventually, she ends up liking this guy, Liam, is that his name?
Yep.
Is Liam the one she likes? Yeah. She likes Liam. Liam has some other friends, Dean and Peyton. And then she meets, the unfortunately named girl, the shark. I feel bad because I don't remember what her fucking name is, but I don't want to call her the shark because that's super rude, but that's her name. She's not a real person. Actually, she probably is a real person. Fucking Jessica Knoll. God damn it. The shark is probably real. The girl was probably really called like the hamster or something, and she just called it the shark. I don't know. And then Olivia and Hillary, or I should say Hillary and Olivia, because their nickname is the Hose, H-O, but also like, haha, they're whores. Yeah, okay.
The popular girl squad that she has to judge back at, even though she's trying to get in their good graces pretty desperately.
Yeah. I forget what mostly really happens, but like she's like trying to get in with the popular kids, but then she meets this kid named Arthur who's like got a lot of acne, is really overweight, and he's a huge nerd, but she really likes him. And, as a friend, like they develop a friendship. It's nothing like weird and sexual or anything.
Because he's gay.
But and they develop a like kind of an uneasy friendship. He also like lives kind of close to her apparently. Or his house is close to the school. That's right. His house is close to the school, so like they're able to hang out a lot, right? And eventually she ends up going to a party at I forget if it's Liam's or Dean's or Peyton's house or Hillary or Olivia's house. I don't know.
It was Olivia's house, I think.
Anyway, she goes to a party with the dudes, but she's the only girl there. She doesn't know she's going to be the only girl there, but when she gets there, she's the only female. She gets incredibly drunk, blacks out, and is then raped by Liam, Dean, and Peyton. And she's so drunk that she only comes to like kind of she's kind of in and out, like she wakes up and somebody's over her, and then she blacks out again. She wakes up and there's like a different guy, between her legs or whatever, and that's like kind of, and then she says the next time she wakes up, she's like, I don't know, like there's like blood in a toilet, and she doesn't understand why because she's so fucked up. Like eventually she wakes up with one of them. She was wishing it was Liam because that's the guy she liked, who she wanted to like be her boyfriend, but it ended up being Dean or Peyton, I don't know, one of them. And she's like crushed because she realizes kind of at that moment like, oh wow, I don't, clearly shit was out of control. She's like tries to find her clothes, but she doesn't have any pants or underwear on, so she has to like run through the house without underwear on to find her underwear. so she can leave.
To which some of the other boys like just make fun of her for, because every man in this book is terrible. Pretty much all of them are a little bit terrible or fully terrible.
Dude, aren't all the women also terrible? Like,
True.
I can't remember a single character in this book that I wouldn't like.
Nell isn't awful. She's supportive of her friend. She also enables a light drug habit by giving her friend a bunch of pills, but only like when she's in a stressful situation, which could kind of go either way in my book, honestly.
Yeah,
Nell's never like outwardly shitty.
I'm not into it. I think that everyone in this book is terrible.
I think Nell's as judgy as Ani
exactly,
is.
and also as obsessed with like material shit and status. But yeah, I mean, so they all make fun of her, and then I forget what happens. Like, obviously, everybody at the school finds out about it because kids talk. And
Tiffany is sort of like the butt of a lot of jokes or like rumors or something like that.
Well, everyone finds out that this occurred, but of course it's not talked about as a rape. Everyone thinks it was consensual and she's just a whore. You know, as they say in the book, she's a hoe or slut. They call her a slut. And I think on her locker, there's like slut bag or something like written on her locker. And I think somebody like stole her gym shorts or something that had blood on them because she got her period a few days later, and they like...
That was Hillary and Olivia.
Yeah, and they like taped that up like on her locker, I think, with the phrase, something like that. So
Smell the skank, I believe.
Yeah, so everybody really turns on her, and I mean, that would destroy anybody.
Liam's nice enough to take her to Planned Parenthood for Plan B, though, so...
Well, yeah, she kind of tells him, like, hey, we gotta take care of this or whatever, and he goes with her, and she's, like, really hoping that they're still gonna have a relationship, even though he's one of the dudes that raped her. And I guess she called him a rapist and then apologized, which is a thing that actually happened to the author, which is one of the reasons why it's in the book. And yeah, that's tough, but I get it. Like, when you're a little kid and you didn't have anybody to really tell you, like, to stand up for yourself and stuff, like, I can very much see that happening.
But I just want to mention that I wanted to mention that specifically because like that's like the one good thing Liam did, good quote unquote.
Yeah, kinda.
And it's like supposed to. There's a lot of like not justifying, but I think just showing. Oh, this complete monster also had a good side. Sometimes he did a nice thing once.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, he didn't even really want to do it. Like, from what I remember, she kind of had to like beg him. And
yeah,
he only went because he didn't want her to be pregnant, obviously, like, knowing. Yeah. You know, so everyone treats it as it's the old double standard of like, oh, the boys had a fun wild night, but the girl's a slut or whatever, even though like, first of all, it wasn't even consensual. Like, second of all, if it was, you still shouldn't say things like that. So, you know, it's fucked up, and like I said, you know, I think anyone at that age would be kind of destroyed by that, you know, by that happening in your school, and she continues to try to act like everything is normal.
She goes to another party where Dean slaps her outside and tries to like assault her again. Yeah,
but she screams or something and wakes up Olivia's parents because it was that's right, that party was at Olivia's house. I don't remember where the first one was. And she screams and wakes up or gets Olivia's parents' attention because they're like really rich and they had this huge house, and so like the kids were partying on one side and the parents were on the other. So she causes a ruckus, and then she runs away. She just starts running through the town. And through, you know, the stars fucking align, and she runs for so long, it's like the middle of the night, and she's in a part of town she doesn't recognize, and she goes into like a convenience store. I don't even remember what she was doing. I think she was asking for directions.
Yeah, she was.
And like I said, you know, the stars align, and who's in the convenience store at that time of night but her favorite teacher, Mr. Larson,
This is an interesting character here in this book too, in some creepy ways. Maybe not. Depends on how you look at some things.
So Ani has a crush on Mr. Larson, like a lot of kids do with their teachers. You know, it's not serious. Nothing's ever going to come of it.
He's young. He's like 24 when he's like an English teacher at this point.
Yeah, he's like barely much older than them, and she's like 17 at the time. Or no, actually...
She's 14.
14? 15?
Yeah, she was 14.
Okay. So she's a freshman in high school. So he's, you know, maybe 10 years older than her. So, you know, not that much older once you're an adult. But at this point, pretty big age gap.
Yeah, there's a lot of developing that happens between 14 and 24.
Yeah, exactly. So they have this encounter, and he sees her obviously, like, bedraggled. Like, I think, you know, she got hit in the face, so she doesn't look great. And, you know, he's like, what the hell's going on? And so he kind of takes her and takes her to his house, which I would like to point out is a critical error on his part.
Yeah, maybe take her home to her family.
No,
Mr.
maybe
Larson.
take her to the police if she was assaulted.
You know, either one is kind of acceptable to me. I forget if she says to not take her home or something. She might tell him not to take her home.
I don't know, but like, don't ever take an underage kid into your home that isn't part of your family. Just a pro tip from me. Don't.
Yeah,
like,
especially if you're a young teacher at a high school. Maybe don't do that shit.
Don't do that. I mean, I get it did seem like he was motivated to help her, and he was not creepy to her at all.
No, he like, there's at one point where she wants him to sleep in the same room as her, and he like kind of gets this like, all right, I guess, okay, and like he sleeps on the floor next to her, and like nothing happens or whatever.
Yeah, like he is clearly trying to handle it in the best way he knows how. You know, in the book, it's pretty clear that he's just like a teacher who wants to do the right thing. He feels really bad for her, and you know, can obviously see that she was assaulted, and she tells him about everything. And then he, you know, I think the next couple of days, he tries to get the ball moving on, like, getting all the boys in trouble and, you know, getting charges pressed. But Tiffany, basically then says it never happened because she doesn't want to deal with the pushback or whatever from everybody. So Mr. Larson was trying to do the right thing and help her out, but like many women who get harassed when they try to make their accusers pay for what they've done, you know, she feels like it's not worth being threatened and ostracized for the rest of her high school career. So she just says it never happened, and Larson and the rest of the school can't really do anything if, you know, she retracts her statement. So everything kind of moves on. You know, like, you find out that people have made accusations against Dean in the past, but like they're all, you know, rich suburban white kids, so presumably it was made to go away before.
Dean's parents funded a lot of the school too.
Oh yeah,
so there's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's even like a hall named after him, his family, because this is like a prestigious prep school, so it's a high school, but like it's kind of handled more like a college, like a university sort of. And like Tiffany's family is like no help at all. Is her dad not in the picture?
Her dad's around, but he's like the physical manifestation of a man going, like he's just in the background, like not giving a shit or like really getting upset that Tiffany dares to like speak up for herself a little bit or something.
I don't remember him existing at all, so I don't know.
He was in a couple of car rides and like around, like he was mostly at the office all the time. So he was definitely like, she didn't have really a male role model. And Tiffany's mom is just basically as status obsessed as anyone else. In the future, when she's working at the magazine and is engaged to her fiance Luke, her mom is basically like, this is your only chance to give us a good life. You have to marry this guy. Don't mess it up. That's her entire character in the future.
Yeah, and her mom and Tiffany like really dislikes her mom with some reason. Like her mom is also, like Chris said, like also into sort of the superficial aspect of life, but she's behind the times in that. You know, for example, like she coached Tiffany to always wear makeup and like wear heavy blush and stuff, but it's like, 2000 at this point, and that wasn't really, or whatever year it wasn't in fashion to wear heavy blush and like a face full of makeup. So Ani was like kind of ostracized for being over made up in like the fashions of a decade past, basically. And like her mom would force her to tan so that she wouldn't be ugly and pale or something. And so I think her mom kind of had her standards of beauty and what she thought was sort of like posh and set those upon Tiffany, but Tiffany slowly realized like her mom's sort of out of the loop. And but instead of just being like, oh, my mom's a little, like she's not really in touch with the modern era, she really, I don't know, she's really hateful toward anything her mother likes or anything her mother would say. Like, she talks about how garish her mom dresses and like her horrible nails and like places that her mom thinks are good. She's really embarrassed of her mom because she thinks her mom is kind of like trashy, basically, even though they're from like an upper middle class family and they have a house and a BMW, but Tiffany's like, oh, we leased the BMW, so like we're really
therefore
poor.
I'm garbage person.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it's kind of hard to read something like that and feel bad for anyone. And that's the thing that this book never really achieved for me, is I never felt any sympathy for really anyone.
Well, let's continue, because after Mr. Larson tries to get the ball rolling and Tiffany just sort of tries to sweep everything under the rug and deny a lot of the stuff, Arthur gets kicked out of the school because he actually leaps to Tiffany's defense after a teacher like kind of makes a dig at her a little bit in a class. And like
really inappropriately, this teacher writes on the chalkboard like, Tiffany is a skank or something. I mean, not really, but she uses a different name, but very pointedly makes it obvious that she's talking about Tiffany, and says like, is a street
cheap
rat
skank
or mall
or
rat?
Something like
Street rat. Yeah, she's Aladdin. That's not was a street rat. The mall skank. I don't know. She says something, and again, this is another thing that Jessica Knoll talks about being true in her real life, is that a teacher really did that to her and said, Jessica's a skank or something on the board. And and Arthur's like, comes to her defense. He gets kicked out of school, and then their relationship is kind of strained too, because he's like, I feel like he's really disappointed in her for not pursuing the charges against the boys who raped her.
Yep.
And for wanting to fit in with the popular people who he's like, they suck, man. Like, and he's right, to be fair. And Arthur was always kind of a little weird, he's gay and not out, so that is tough, of course.
There's rumors of him sort of like giving another student a blowjob up at like the hookup point or something, and those are spread all around the school, I guess, and to other schools, in fact. Yeah,
this kid Ben, who used to go to their school but got expelled, like, I forget why, shrug, or got, I don't really, they don't give you a lot of information, but it was Arthur's best friend, I guess, and the rumor was that like he sucked Ben's dick or something, even though that didn't happen. These details might be slightly wrong because it's been a while since I finished the book. Anyway, there's some rumor like that about Arthur and Ben having this gay encounter. Ben ends up getting kicked out of school, and then Arthur ends up getting kicked out of school eventually. And
so they both decide to Columbine Bradley up.
Yep. And so suddenly, one day they both come back to Bradley, and they had pipe bombs, and they had a bunch of assault rifles. It was basically almost like it was lifted from the Columbine thing. They had pipe bombs, and most of them didn't go off. Mm-hmm. Only one of them did, and then they basically stormed the school, picking off people that they felt deserved it. Yeah, and so the whole thing unfolds, and I think they even ask, do you believe in God? I think that happened in the book. No, they don't. That doesn't happen. Are you sure? I'm 100% sure that doesn't happen. They asked them something. I'm gonna check because they definitely Arthur offers Tiffany the gun at one point when Dean is on the floor, like having already been shot,
and he wants to give Tiffany sort of the killing blow, I guess, so she can get revenge on him. But instead, she fucking stabs him with a knife to death. And then runs away.
Yeah. So
there's a couple of levels of trauma there. First of all, one of your best friends coming back and murdering a bunch of people, you know. Some of them people you don't necessarily like, but he also murders Liam, and Peyton sort of burns alive afterwards because he's shot. But Tiffany didn't drag Peyton out when the building was like setting on fire, and she feels some guilt about that too.
Was it Peyton?
Yeah, Peyton was the one that died in the fire. Liam was cornered in a room after he split up from Tiffany and another student who were running away. I think the shark, actually.
Yeah, I'm having trouble finding the exact place, but yeah, I mean, so basically only one of them survives. One of her attackers survives, but he's in a wheelchair
Dean.
for the rest of his life. Yeah, Dean. And yeah, and so like Chris is saying, you know, there's some level of trauma there when she decides she has to stab her best friend in order to stop the attack. So that's fucked up. But there's like another level where Anya is implicated as being part of the attack because she was close with Arthur, because three of the boys who were either killed or attacked were people she had accused of raping her.
She didn't accuse them because she kept silent, but they did rape her, and Arthur knew about that, and they would trade. They had a yearbook, an old yearbook that where Arthur used to went to school with some of these people, and they would write sort of like pithy little captions about them being horrible people, how they deserve to die. Which sort of, when the police came around investigating the shooting, they thought maybe Tiffany was involved in it because Dean said that Arthur was trying to give her the kill shot, and the stuff in the yearbook seemed pretty, wasn't a good look.
Well, that and her fingerprints were on one of the guns, but it was because they had been playing with it at Arthur's house at some other day.
That's not quite the right image of what happened.
Yeah,
Arthur
not really.
offers her the gun by pointing it at her,
Yeah,
and she flips out about it, but she still takes it for a second, so there's like maybe some fingerprints on it.
Yeah, so
they weren't exactly playing with it. Arthur was showing it off to be like cool, and she was freaked out about it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I thank you for clarifying. But they basically had this, you know, they were hanging out, and her fingerprints ended up on one of the guns. So they had her fingerprints on one of the weapons, you know, and I guess it wasn't the one that she had handled during the altercation, the yearbook, and like, you know, all that stuff tying her to it. She had been questioned, and eventually, you know, they didn't end up prosecuting her or anything. They didn't feel like they had enough evidence to really implicate her. But so it's like, you know, you go to high school, and on top of having all these regular problems and people being mean to you, you get gang raped, and then you have to kill one of your only friends, because if not, he might kill more people that you don't really care about, but you want to prevent a massacre. And then, also they try to pin some of it on you. Like, I don't really know how anyone could kind of get through all that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the central point of the book, because years later, she gets asked to participate in a documentary about sort of what happened there and the future lives of people that were involved in it. So the documentary people talk to her, they talk to Mr. Larson, they talk to Dean, they talk to Arthur's mom and a bunch of different things. And Tiffany agrees to do the documentary because she feels it'll give her some closure. Luke is not into that idea at all because he's just a general asshole that like doesn't seem to want her to do anything except be a pretty trophy for him.
You're just wrong about one thing, though. She also wants to do it for status and to be famous. Because she's going to be on this documentary, and she's going to be the, you know, basically like one of the stars. And by the time they film it, remember, she should already be married. So she's like, remember, my name is Ani Harrison, not Tiffany Finelli. Because she thinks her name is like trashy and whatever. So she goes by Ani instead of Tiffany or Tiffany or Tiffy or whatever people call her. So, yeah, she's, gonna do this documentary for fame, basically, and status. Like, she does everything. But she finds out that, like, Dean's gonna be a part of it, and they kind of want them to, like, do a weird on-camera confrontation, which sounds like a terrible idea to me. I don't know what producer would think that that's a good idea.
It's dramatic, so it's good for the watching.
Yeah, and like basically off camera, she gets him to admit that he raped her. And he's like,
even though he's mostly like, oh come on, you don't have to call it that.
Yeah,
jeez,
he's like, oh come on, I'm already in a wheelchair. Like, come on, yeah, I was a kid.
I don't even like my wife. Jesus.
Yeah. So there's this the idea that people think that when you're young, any crime is like if you're a certain age, any crime is excusable, especially sexual assault. And it's like because I think at the time the boys were older than her too, right? They were like 17,
they were like,
18.
Yeah.
Maybe they must not have been 18, but 17 maybe.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's not a valid excuse. Like
it really isn't.
I can't believe I even have to say that, but when you're 17, you know that you shouldn't be forcibly raping women. Sorry, but like that's
and you need to be asking
thing.
For their consent and not just, hey, she's asleep so she can't say no. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, it's real messed up. And
which might be again relevant to current events.
Mm-hmm. So that happens, and then
yeah, it's 30 years later. The documentary thing is
30
wrapping.
years later.
30, yeah, shit, sorry. Not 30.
It's
I'm
like
sorry.
10 years later.
Yeah,
or
Jesus,
15
wow.
years? Yeah. Because she's 28? 29?
Yeah, she's
28 or 29? Yeah.
That's definitely not how math works. I'm sorry that I forgot how math worked for a second there.
Chris, I don't know. Chris fell into a black hole.
It's not math club.
No. So, and fast forward to all, this time later, she's 28 and she's engaged and going to do this documentary, and somehow I'm trying to remember what happens next. After
she does all the documentary stuff and she comes back for the wedding.
No, there's more stuff. There's more stuff that happens. So by chance, her fiance is somehow doing business with her old teacher, Mr. Larson. And they end up at a dinner all together. Now, before she goes to the dinner, she doesn't know it's going to be Mr. Larson, of course. Because I think her fiance was just calling him Andrew, and of course when you're like a kid in school, you don't call your teachers by their first names usually. Like, it's not really how you remember them. So he's talking about Andrew, and has no idea this last name is Larson. They get there, and they recognize each other, and there's like this really creepy thing that happens where they're kind of both like, oh, it's you. Like, it's kind of this like weird longing to be together, and it just struck me as very odd because it seemed like in her retelling of what had happened in the past, Mr. Larson was like, he did the right thing. He wasn't creepy to her at all. He tried to help her out. Didn't seem like he was, there was no inkling that he was like creepily interested in her. So it's really weird when all of a sudden they meet, 15 years later, and he's like, oh, we're both married or about to be married, but I guess I'm into you now. Like, it didn't really make sense to me.
I think this book goes through a whole lot of hoops to kind of justify, like, why it's okay for them to maybe hook up or something. Oh, they're both adults now, and he respects her for her bravery in the face of everything else, and that's what's really attracting him to her, is how it's really presented. And even though he, in the end, doesn't really want to do anything, they do like make out after they like drop by the Bradley at night for some reason to like check it out.
Dude, like, there are things in this book that so we also haven't addressed the concept of like the fact that it's very possible that Tefani is an unreliable narrator.
Sure.
There's even a hint that maybe clues you into that when they talk about how they're reading Catcher in the Rye and how Holden Caulfield is an unreliable narrator. And I do wonder about her when it comes to Mr. Larson. It's like, did they really make out in the school together? I don't know. Did they even go to that school together? I don't know. Like, she totally could have been just like hoping that had happened. And it's really weird because she's so into her old teacher, and that they make a date. And they go on a date together. She even wears her nice panties just in case.
Oh, yeah.
Gross.
That, like,
Yikes.
psychopath detail of, like, well, he shouldn't fuck me, and I know I'm not going to fuck him, but, like, just in case.
Ugh. So they have a date. And, I forget if do they have a second date?
I don't think so. I think it's just, like, they kind of meet up somewhere after a thing happens, or, like, after a certain scene is filmed, and she gets a little emotional on him.
Yeah, and they end up getting pizza and then going back to Bradley, and then they make out in an old classroom, which is just real weird.
Yeah, that's a yikesy right there.
Yeah, that's super not cool. Like, he's married, she has a fiance, she used to be a student, like, and I don't know, like I said, I was confused because there seemed to be no romantic relationship or sexual relationship or anything when they were younger. So, like,
but Tiffany definitely kind of wanted it when she was younger.
Sure, but he didn't seem to at all. So it really surprised me that all of a sudden, he seems to have a happy life with his wife, and then she pops in and all of a sudden he's at her feet. That's why that was one of the things that made me wonder if, like, I wonder if any of this was really happening, because yeah, I don't know. I think that's
a reasonable thing to question, because, again, this character is not a nice person and doesn't really care about anyone's feelings other than her own, it seems like. Especially when we get towards the end, because after this whole thing, like I said, she flies back after doing the whole documentary thing. She's about to marry her fiance, and then, like, at the literal last second, she's like, nah.
Yeah, she figures out that he broke a picture she had of Arthur and Arthur's dad. Like, he knocked it off of a shelf. It was something she had kept, and he tried to, like, conceal the evidence that he broke the frame by putting it under the sink and, like, threw the picture away. And she found that, and, like, that was her last final straw. And I was just like, that's kind of a weird thing to be your final straw, but okay.
It was after, like, an emotional journey going through the documentary filming or whatever, because she, like, meets up with Arthur's mom to have that filmed, which is another, like, yikesy decision by the producer.
Yeah, right.
And like, she gets Dean to admit to that thing, like, on a hot mic, essentially. So I think the whole point at the ending scene here is that this is her final undoing of all these things she's put on herself, all these things society has put on her, the expectations and what the status and power that she wants, and she decides nah at the last second, and then she has to go and re-record her introduction for the documentary, because at first she was Annie Harrison, and now she's at the end of the book, and she says, I'm Tiffany Finelli.
Yeah, so the thing is, though, despite it, at the end of the book, it's very much like she's telling and not showing kind of a thing, where, she breaks off the marriage literally during the wedding. She just, like, fucking leaves.
It's like seconds before they walk down the
aisle. She's like, nope, fuck this. And that's kind of where the book ends. And yeah, I think like getting him to admit it at a hot mic, does she use that recording for something? Does it get publicized? I don't remember.
They don't go into what edit of the documentary comes out or whatever, but she feels like that the fact that it's possible is kind of freeing for her.
Yeah, and so it's really just like okay, so I sat through this book reading the inner monologue of a sociopath who has been abused and traumatized by things that nobody should have to go through, especially all kind of almost simultaneously or back to back. And I'm like, okay, but I still hate this person and this character. In fact, I don't like any of these characters. And at the end, that character is, like, rewarded for how shitty she is, and I'm just like, I don't know how to feel. Like, I didn't learn anything from this book.
Here's what I think is, again, sort of the central discussion point here for me about this book is, do you have to like any characters in a book? Does it have to be a portrait of someone who is noteworthy or good? Or can we just have a book full of damaged people acting shitty to each other at all times as just a depiction of how these things can blossom from one person to another? because boy, is like everybody trashed, like literally everybody.
Yeah,
Arthur, you thought maybe was fine, but then he murders a bunch of people.
But then he kills everyone.
All the friends are all bitchy, shitty, and judgy, and Tiffany is like, oh, I'm not as bad as them, but you are somehow even worse than them. Does any of the trauma and all this stuff you've erected around yourself to protect yourself from that, like, justify who you are? Can you even, like, if everyone around you is shitty all the time, does that mean you're guaranteed to be shitty as well? Do you have a hope to be a good person at all? I think you do, personally, because I grew up around some shitty circumstances, and I think I turned out okay. It wasn't nearly as surrounded by assholes as Tiffany was.
Yeah, I mean, you asked a lot of questions there.
That was like a whole fucking spiel on the central question of this book is hurt people, but is it okay for them to hurt people?
And also, is it okay for those hurt people who have hurt other people to have an okay thing happen eventually? And yes. So it's tough for me because I actually do prefer a media that is a little uncomfortable, because I think that's how you learn something, and I think that's kind of the best media out there is something that isn't just easy to passively consume. Like, it either makes you think really hard, or is maybe something you've never thought about before, or, as I mentioned, like, is maybe uncomfortable. Like, American Psycho is a great example of that. Like, we've referenced it a few times, and the book and the film, I think, are both really great. It's a portrait of it could be construed as a portrait of the dangers of kind of masculinity and capitalism in America, or just the rantings of somebody who is crazy, or maybe a little bit of both.
Is this the lady version of American Psycho?
Well, that's what we were joking about, is like, yeah. But at the same time, I don't feel it's there. This is a kind of a pulpy novel, written for women who are just like the main character, I think. I don't think this is an intellectual kind of, adventure, or like something that's I don't know. It's really difficult to parse, I guess, my feelings on this, but reading this and reading American Psycho are two very different experiences. I recommend you read American Psycho and see the film. I do not recommend that you read Luckiest Girl Alive or see the movie that eventually Reese Witherspoon is making of it, apparently.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, supposedly.
I might lightly disagree with you here, because, I mean, we're having a pretty intense discussion about this book, it seems. This is definitely not a laugh-a-minute episode.
No. This episode's not funny. I'm really sorry, everyone.
That's okay, but these are, like, legit questions here. I think it's fine to have a book where, like, literally everyone is shitty. There's other entertainment where everyone's shitty that we definitely consume. Like, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is basically about a bunch of complete assholes, but that's a comedy, and they get their comeuppance quite a bit.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, like, American Psycho is a book where, like, I didn't, no one, like, the main character isn't really a good person or redeeming, or at least you wonder the whole time what really is going on, and I don't think that's bad, and actually, I know the difference, because I feel like in this book, in Luckiest Girl Alive, the book is begging you to forgive the main character. It's begging you to tell her, oh, it's fine that you're like this, because, you went through a lot. It's totally fine. You can totally be an asshole. You deserve every good thing that happens to you. You deserve to be mean to everyone because everyone was mean to you. And books like American Psycho and other things, like, I've never seen It's Always Sunny, but I think I saw that one scene where Danny DeVito's on a couch. That's all I know about that show.
that's a pretty good short.
Yeah, that's my only foray into that show, is Danny DeVito.
Nice
on a
encapsulation of that show.
Yeah, I guess. But even like Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, like, there are plenty of really complicated, complex characters that are really in a gray area between whether they're good or bad, right? But it's compelling, and it doesn't beg you to love all of them. And I think that's the thing. This book is trying to get you to that point, but I don't think that it should, and I wish that it wouldn't. I wish it would just portray itself as it is and not sit here and try to be this sort of like edgy, like, oh, I'm a kind of the, like, oh, the bad girl with a heart of gold. Like, that's not, she doesn't have a heart of gold. Stop trying to tell people that she does.
The rest of the family that she's marrying into and her family voted Romney, but she didn't because she's feminist and she thinks
that's what I'm saying.
Like racism and sexism and homophobia are wrong. She calls people out on that shit, and she thinks that makes her way better than everyone else, when at the same time she's no better than any of them because she totally judges people based on status and how poor they are or not. So I can't imagine she's on like the Democratic platform for like helping the needy that much when she's judging everyone for what they wear.
Yeah, and I mean,
at every turn.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is like the book is trying to get you to accept her as she is and forgive her for all this shit, because it puts things like that in there. Like, oh, but look at her look at her yell at this racist and look at her vote Democratic. And it's like, that doesn't make up for how shitty of a person she is. And yeah, I just feel like the book is really trying to get you to a point where you are sympathetic for the main character. And I certainly never got there. I read this book and I was like, this lady fucking sucks. I don't care what happens to her. Like, I don't wish her any additional ill, but I also don't care because she seems like an asshole.
She really, and like when you said bad girl with a heart of gold, there's definitely some passages that like really play that angle up a little.
Let me okay, so another problem, we haven't even touched like the writing in this book. So
before you say anything, I do want to say that I think there's moments of like really insightful stuff that is really well done, but there's also other like ridiculous pulpy moments.
Yeah.
And you have a couple. I think I have a couple.
So I can try to read you something that I think is good first. And also a sentiment that like I have definitely felt in my own life, so I get it. At the very first scene, actually, I can just read the first scene in the book. No, right. I won't. Yeah, I guess I kind of have to read a little bit before it because otherwise just saying it out of turn doesn't make sense. So this is the opening to the book. I inspected the knife in my hand. That's the shun. Feel how light it is compared to the Wusthof? I pricked a finger on the blade's witchy chin, testing. The handle was supposed to be moisture resistant, but it was quickly going humid in my grip. I think that design is better suited for someone of your stature. I looked up at the sales associate, bracing for the word people always use to describe short girls hungry to hear thin. Petite. He smiled like I should be flattered. Slender, elegant, graceful. Now there's a compliment that might actually defang me. Another hand, the skin several shades lighter than my own, appeared in the frame and made a grab for the handle. Can I feel? I looked up at him, too. My fiancé. That word didn't bother me so much as the one that came after it. Husband. The word laced the corset tighter, crushing organs, sending panic into my throat with the bright beat of a distress signal. I could decide not to let go. Slip the forged nickel and stainless steel blade soundlessly into his stomach. The salesman would probably emit a simple, dignified, "Oh!" It was the mother carrying her crusty-nosed baby behind him who was the screamer. You could just tell she was that dangerous combination of bored and dramatic that she would gleefully, tearfully recount the attack to the news reporters who would later swarm the scene. I turned the knife over before I could tense, before I could lunge, before every muscle in my body, forever on high alert, contracted as if on autopilot. So, that was an example of, like, it was good and then it got stupid.
Yeah, the part about, I'm less scared of that word than the word that comes after it.
Yeah, like, I'm scared about being married and, like, using this analogy of, like, marriage and the corset, like, both things used to constrain women in different ways, and, like, yeah,
really
that was great.
Wow, good job.
But then she's like, oh, and then I could, like, stab him, and like, oh, and then she starts critiquing the woman with the baby near her. It's just like, whatever, dude.
Yeah, like the judgment part is, like, really indicative of her character, but I want you to notice the, like, nice little parallel here of, like, she has stabbed someone to death before, right? So we don't know that at this point in the book, but this is something that she's technically capable of, I guess.
Yeah. But I just feel like the writing, and I'm sure you could probably feel it gets this really, like, to use a word of our time, it gets real edgelord a lot of the time, where it's just like,
yeah, there's a couple
trying...
of good... She'll be talking about how she views some people, and like then she's judging their sex life and talking about she's so vanilla. I need to have my pussy shocked with electricity and be hit to feel anything.
She literally says that. She's like, I need volts to my pussy, and like I need to be punched in the face, and you're just like,
Yeah.
okay. And different strokes and everything. Like, I'm sure plenty of people are into that.
That's not the issue.
It's just that it's there to be hyperbolic, whatever. To be extreme.
You have a passage here that I think exemplifies the edgelord thing really well.
So she's talking, and this is actually kind of part of the same passage where she's talking about what makes her so much better than the other girls. Rusted and bacteria-ridden, I'm the blade that nicks at the perfectly hemmed seams of Luke's star quarterback life, threatening to shred it apart. And he likes that threat, the possibility of my danger. But he doesn't really want to see what I can do, the ragged holes I can open. I've spent most of our relationship scratching the surface, experimenting with the pressure. How much is too much before I draw blood? I'm getting tired. Bleh.
Yeah,
Kill me.
It's a little over the top in my book in that there's also a couple other things that seem to like just be there to titillate, like the scene where she hooks up with a bartender who's a lesbian just because.
Yeah, like Luke's parents have like a summer house on Nantucket because they're rich white people, and at this bar there's the lesbian bartender named Lizzie, who they call Leslie, which is like the same tired fucking joke everyone makes when you encounter a lesbian whose name is some variation of Liz, Elizabeth, or Lizzie. So they're like, oh, Lizzie the lesbian, and she like gives the bartender kind of the idea that she might be into her, and then uses it to make her boyfriend jealous and like aroused, and it's like really fucked up. Like,
but she also does hook up with the bartender,
but then doesn't tell anyone. Like, the bartender follows her into the bathroom and like pushes her up against a wall and starts making out with her, and I'm just like, it's just this, it's another book full of like all these things that make me wonder, would all of this really happen to one person? Like, that it just seems like a little ridiculous.
There's also like some pointless titillation there. There's another relevant thing. Speaking of that, there's a scene when she's getting carried out of the school after the shooting has happened. She's getting put in an ambulance, and they have her in a hospital gown or something, and she like trips and falls when she's trying to explain something. She's like in a high anxiety state, and it's described as my Titanic breasts spilling out of the hospital gown, which seems a little over the top for... I don't think you're that big anyway. You didn't mention how big they were before. Also, this is like a traumatic scene, and like, why...
Yeah, why the slapstick...
Aren't hospital gowns cinched in the back also?
Well, some people do accidentally put them on backwards, but like, yeah, I don't need any slapstick comedy when you're like being put in an ambulance after a school shooting. Like, it just seemed like a strange choice.
I think it's supposed to be like an embarrassing humiliation thing, but just the use of the word Titanic
breasts, yeah, it's
was
not...
a little... It's that word choice that really made me stop for a second.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. And there's quite a few things in the book. So, I mean, the writing isn't the worst. I mean, it certainly has some redeeming passages and stuff. And, it wasn't like full of grammatical errors or spelling errors. It seemed to be thoroughly edited, which I appreciated.
Some of the thematic elements did kind of gel together. Like, there's the whole thing about her name and how she sees herself that is, intertwined with her status. And at the end, she finally says, I'm Tiffany Finelli. So she's accepting, like, her real identity, maybe. But we really don't see what happens after that. Just because she, like, accepted that name doesn't mean she's stopped being a bitch to everyone or...
Yeah. I mean, and that's like one of the questions you posed was like, does just knowing that your trauma negatively affected you absolve you of acting like an asshole? And I don't think it does. I mean,
it doesn't. It's a good first step, but it absolutely doesn't.
Like, that's a good way to put it. It's step one, like acknowledge that. One, acknowledge you're a jerk. Two, acknowledge why you're a jerk. And then, steps 3 through X, are you actively working to change that? And yeah, I see
she
no...
doesn't really, except maybe by calling off the wedding, that's the best use so, because at least she's trying to make she's trying to not make a huge lie happen, but you should have done it before, honey, like way, way before.
Yeah, and I mean, her whole life at this point, it isn't really even her own. You know what I mean? Like, she says that she wants all these things, like, oh, I want to have this job at this magazine, and I want to have all this money, and I want to have this nice husband, but, like, is that what you really want? Or is it just what you think will make you safe and powerful? Like, you know what I mean? I think that it's one of those things where I don't know that she even has a sense of self outside of consumerism and kind of these social hierarchies and social rules that she cares about.
And I don't know whether she undid that or not by the end of the book. She certainly, again, took a first step maybe towards it, but without maybe like a couple extra pages or an epilogue about how stuff turned out. I really don't have any context on whether she just decided to at least try, and maybe that's a good first step, and that's the whole point of the ending. But she's just, again, she's surrounded by assholes her whole life, but that doesn't absolve you from being an asshole too.
Yeah,
and despite all your trauma, you're still shitty and judgy to everybody.
Yeah, like
about anything.
All the bad things she experienced, whether it was the rape or the school shooting where she had to, kill her friend. I mean, those things certainly intensified, various issues she had, but all of that stuff there were already seeds of her being a shithead that were sown well before any of that happened.
Oh yeah, she was judgy as fuck even before any of that happened.
And and I think, and I mean, it was a little bit her mom. It was a little bit, just the general climate in which a person or a woman grows up in America at that time, and still in present day. In many places, especially where she was, kind of like suburban Philly, like near New York City, rich people, like rich, white people, they have their societal rules and whatever, and if you don't live up to them in every way, then you're an outcast. And I mean, I think that, like, I think maybe you and I were fortunate enough to grow up in different environments. We also didn't grow up wealthy, I think, which may have something to do with it. But
yeah.
I mean, I certainly, like, as a girl, I had some of the same pressures and some of the similar issues. Like, I definitely have had, struggles about my physical appearance and my weight, and some things I still struggle with. Like, I still have a really hard time accepting, just how I look in general. Like, it's just one of those things that I think every woman deals with. I know some men deal with it too, and some people who are non-binary, people, it's a common thing. But and so some of the stuff I could relate to, but not at quite the level, I think. And yeah, I think it was just another one of the things in this book that made it hard to relate to, because it was kind of blown out of proportion, at least from my experience. Like, I know that some people have anorexia and some people have, like, over-exercising disorders and whatever, but I never really got to either of those points. So for me, it's just like, I can kind of relate, but, like,
I mean, yeah, everyone's going to tackle trauma differently, and I've certainly had, I've grown up decently, I would say, but there's some abuse in my past for sure, so I can kind of relate on... Does having a shitty, traumatic section of your life give you license to kind of be more barbed and sharp to everyone else in order to protect yourself? And I can understand the urge for sure, but I just come to such a different conclusion in the end.
Yeah,
where
me too.
I would rather be someone that doesn't exemplify those traits that someone else showed to me.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. It's like, whether it was, weight and body image issue stuff, or whether it was other types of abuse, I had, similar problems. And it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's cool to be like, oh, I'm going to be the grim specter of evil over here, and no one's going to touch me, like, and be, fucking, like, an antagonist forever, but like
while you were out partying, I was studying the blade.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but like that's not. It's not a satisfying way to live. It's not a good way to live for me.
It's very unhealthy, and it just kind of traps you in a cycle of negativity that isn't healthy for anyone, either yourself or those around you.
Yeah, and it's like, why would you want to make things shitty for other people? Like, when you've already been through shit, I don't know. I mean, I know that, there are a lot of complex factors that, are involved in how people kind of end up in a behavioral sense, a psychological sense. Yep. But, I mean, for me, it's just, I don't get it. Like, I don't see the point.
Speaking of bad people and bad outcomes and stuff like that, here's another hard question that I think is an interesting one to ask. Did the three boys, Dean, Peyton, and Liam, deserve what they got in the shooting? Liam died, Peyton burned alive after being shot, and Dean was paralyzed from the waist down forever.
Yeah, I mean, like, my rational brain wants to give a different measured response, but my first instinct is probably which,
they weren't nice boys.
Is maybe kind of it's like so my first instinct is like the second you ask the question, my internal monologue yells yes, like without a second thought. But I know that that's probably not reasonable. And
Dean gives motivational speeches to people now and might have helped some people out of a funk or something, despite the fact that he's still internally kind of the same asshole, especially towards women, it seems like, when he just calls his wife fucking stupid in front of Tiffany.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, kind of my animal instinct is like, yeah, they deserved it, fuck them. But asking whether they deserved it and whether, if you were given a choice what you would choose, I think that's different.
True.
I think that given a choice, I think that everyone deserves a chance at rehabilitation, and then if you fuck that up, yeah, fuck you. Get burned alive, get shot to death, I don't care. But I think that rehabilitation is something that is really successful in other societies, and in America, it's not really an avenue that's pursued. Mostly we just imprison people and then profit off of their imprisonment because this country is incredibly fucked up. So, like, thinking from it, from that perspective, it's like, my views, my political and social views, I guess, are that you should try to rehabilitate people, try to make them understand, like, what they did was fucked up and wrong, and, like, make them understand that what they did was not okay and that they can't do it again. I mean, and it works for some people.
It certainly wasn't working for these boys who kind of got let off the hook every time by a supportive school populace and administration who are doing the boys will be boys shit.
Well, that's not rehabilitation, right? That's
what I mean. So they're conceivably, they would not have faced consequences, and they would have not have realized what they've done was wrong, possibly forever.
Yeah, I mean, so fuck them, I guess.
Maybe.
Yeah,
they certainly sowed their own seeds, because I don't think Arthur and Ben went after any innocent bystanders, except maybe Aunt Celie, that one girl who I don't even know why they shot her.
I don't know. They killed quite a few people. I don't know that there's ever a way to know why they killed some of the other people. I think some of it was random. I mean, I think they definitely had their targets, but then there was collateral damage around those targets. So I think some people did die that,
they were certainly looking to murder a lot of people if they had 9 pipe bombs in the cafeteria.
Yeah, and fuck, they definitely asked someone something before they shot them. That's why I was like, oh shit, did they ask them if they believed in God? Because I remember them...
That definitely didn't happen.
Asking... I don't know. I remember them asking something, and I can't remember. Yeah. Well, I mean, you make a good point, though. It's like, if they hadn't raped Tiffany, and if they hadn't persecuted, Ben and him for something they didn't even, for being gay, basically, like, would this have happened? I mean, of course, you can't try to write it off as like, well, if only they were nicer, like, that guy wouldn't have shot him to death. Like, that's a little...
kind of the other half of it.
Yeah, it's a little too far in that direction, but...
So I don't know. That's like a tough question for me. I don't necessarily think they deserve to die. Maybe Dean's the one that like really kind of got not appropriate level, but like
yeah, I mean he got punished and
he certainly didn't learn, it seems like.
Yeah. And that's the thing to think about too. It's like, well, if the one guy who lived, even though he is paralyzed from the waist down and you know, like, and he still didn't learn, then maybe the other two dying was fine. Like, I don't know. It's a messed up thing to say. But you know, we're just talking about these things in a vacuum. So like, don't take any of the things we say as like, you know, pronouncements on real life. Like that's not really the case. But
I think that's what this book was, and what Jessica Knoll was trying to get at is like, this isn't supposed to be necessarily a redemption story by my read. It's just a portrait of a bunch of fucked up people trying to like, I don't know, either cover for themselves or make things better depending on their personal level of justification and trauma, even though the boys didn't seem to necessarily have any trauma to them. They were just complete assholes. So it's just a mess of assholes. That's all I have to say about this book is, can you enjoy a book with a mess of assholes and like a portrait of them?
I think
if you think that's a valid thing to write about, then fine, maybe read this book.
Well, I think you can, but I don't think that the author didn't do it in a way that that worked for me, so I wouldn't recommend it.
It's definitely a thinky one, though. This has been a lengthy discussion.
Well, I mean, my personal opinion is that if you want to read something like this, where the main character is kind of a jerk and, you know, maybe has some issues and the story is like interesting, you can read fucking that book I read, Sharp Objects. You can read that because that is a much better kind of analysis of what happens when patterns of abuse are allowed to continue. And you get a fucked up narrator that you don't really love, but the story, the way it's written, it's all way better. I highly recommend that. I've seen other people say that, like, oh, this novel is just like, you know, Sharp Objects and Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and it's really not. Like, they're trying to, I feel like they're trying to do similar things, but this book fails, whereas Sharp Objects succeeds. I have not yet read Gone Girl, but, yeah, so that's my recommendation. If you're looking for this, but actually good, pick up something by Gillian Flynn. But anyway.
Right. Maybe I will try that out because, like, this was a confusing one for me.
Yeah.
I'm really, like, straight down the middle on it. Like, it might be a valid read for some people, but, like, I don't like any of the characters in here. Yeah. I don't like them.
Yeah, I agree. And sorry, I just wanted to say that. That being said, about me recommending Sharp Objects, I do think, you know, obviously I'm not like, oh, it's 120%, it's the most perfect book ever. Like, you know, you can recommend something that maybe has an issue or two, is all I'm saying. Don't expect perfection, but it's much better than this. And I think the last thing I really want to address before we kind of close the episode is this whole thing in this book. So where I was saying I felt like maybe it was sort of like setting up all of this asshole, horrible tendency, like sociopathic shit, kind of to tear it down. I was also thinking that this book was setting up kind of capitalism, material gain, all these weird social hierarchies and social rules to kind of like tear it all down. But it doesn't do that. Even though Ani leaves her wedding, like you said, it doesn't really continue.
She revels in the whole status thing up until the very end. Yep. Even after she like gets rid of, or she cancels the wedding or whatever. She's still just as obsessed with all these material things. That's never not a part of her.
Yeah, and when I was reading about the author, I was expecting to find the author talk about how toxic this kind of culture is and how bad it is for women, but it seems like the author actually also buys into it wholesale. She even talks about there's this little thing in the book the author, or that the main character mentions a couple of times. It's like, when you meet someone, you never say nice to meet you, you say nice to see you, because that's I don't know, that's what fancy
Classier.
people say.
Yeah.
And apparently that's something the author actually learned from someone and lives by and gave as advice. And I was like, oh, fuck, really? And, like, I don't know. She also wrote this article about, like, I want to be rich and I'm not sorry for it. And, like, that's cool, man. But, yeah, I
then
just...
the whole wedding diet thing, too.
Oh, yeah, the whole wedding diet thing where she was like, yeah, I recognize it was really unhealthy. I guess I shouldn't, you know, obviously, like, that was really bad of me to, like, go on that crazy diet and lose, like, you know, 20 pounds in a few weeks or something. And I know that was bad. And now I'm happy at my being 5'3" and 120 pounds. And I'm like, yeah, because that's still thin. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, no, I'm not out here, like, being the board of women's weight or something. Like, I'm not the UN for women's bodies, but like
officially sanctioned by the UN of
yes,
women's bodies.
Yes,
it's a really confusing acronym. UNWB.
But, you know, it's like 5'3" and 120 pounds is a perfectly, like, healthy, slim person. So it's really weird. It actually made me kind of upset on a personal level when she said that in her article. I think it may even come up in the book. I don't remember. Because I'm shorter than that and heavier than that. So I was like, great. So I'm one of those people that you would make fun of if you saw me in public. I mean, of course, because I don't dress in designer clothes and I don't spend a lot of money on purses and shit. So I was just like, it made me sit there and think, like, okay, you know, I really feel like the author is this character in this book, and also that she's perhaps just as shitty as the character in this book.
Yeah, that's the thing that really confused me. She
Yeah.
seems self-aware about how shitty some things are, and then just rolls with it anyway. She's judging everyone else for being materialistic, and then she's like, "Oh, but I need this purse just so I have that status over everyone else." And there was that interview you were talking about where, like, it seems like the interview person was like, "Oh wow, Tiffany has to deal with all these, like, pressures from society and about just, like, appearance and status and everything. Do you think that this is a good commentary on that?" And the author, Jessica Knoll, is just like, yeah, I love having those things.
Yeah,
I love having those nice purses.
It's weird. It seems like she's aware that she lives in this world of pure evil, but is like, well, this is what I got to work with, right?
But
so
I'm
she
still
just
the
rolls
best
with
at
it,
it, so therefore it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, she is a fucking writer for Cosmo and Self, so, you know.
Yeah, and I just, for me, it's really troubling to have people reading this and being like, you know, I should emulate this person because that's what happened. People are like, oh, the character went through a rape, I went through a rape, therefore I should be more like this character. And it's like, Jesus Christ, no, don't do it.
Please don't be like Tiffany.
Don't do
Don't
it.
ever be like...
And it boggles my mind that anyone would find this character relatable. You know, we've all had bad thoughts. Like, I don't think Chris or I are saying, like, we're perfect saints or anything, but, yeah, this book just goes places that somebody who is of sound mind wouldn't go. And I mean, obviously that's the point, but, like, if that's the point, then people probably shouldn't be idolizing the character.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Alrighty, well,
yeah.
Don't be like anyone in this book.
Nope.
Don't ever be like anyone in this book.
Oh yeah, and the only other comment I had was, like, ultimately I think this book was just written as, like, a form of therapy and an income stream for the author. Like, I think that she...
Is that so terrible, though?
I mean, no. I mean, your motive behind writing the book isn't terrible. I mean, if this helps her overcome her assault, which I really think it did, because, you know, a year or so after the book came out, she opened up about the fact that it actually happened when she apparently had never admitted it really before. No, that's great. It served a purpose. I really just worry about all the people that consume the book and idolize the character and kind of think, like, oh, I should also be, like, a selfish jerk, and I don't want people to be selfish jerks. We have enough of those in the world. We don't need more selfish jerks. Yeah, so anyway, my ultimate decision is do not read this book. Chris, what do you think?
I'm mixed. I'm very mixed.
Damn.
I can't decide. I'm
All
like,
right.
this is a really thinky one for me, as I keep saying. I can't decide.
All right. Well, thanks, Veronica, for recommending the book.
Thank you, Veronica.
Actually, I'm going to read why she recommended it. So I'll just paraphrase a little bit. She said, "Oh, it was a bestseller, and I was really excited to read it, but the main character was so unlikable. She was rude and unkind to her mother, fiance. I was scratching my head the whole time reading it, like, why am I following this person? I don't care what happens to her. Then terrible things happened, but I wasn't moved by it. So I don't know how or why I finished it." So that was kind of her assessment. Is why she recommended it.
I think we're on the same page as her with most of that.
Yeah. So anyway, that brings our review of Luckiest Girl Alive to a close. We'd like to, at this point, thank our patrons. So thank you to Veronica, the patron who recommended this book. Thanks also to Dari, Greg, Will, and our newest patron, Dee. Thanks for joining the ranks of the Terrible Book Club.
Thank you for joining the Terrible Book Club. You're in the terrible book hole with us now.
Yeah, this is where you'll die. Get comfy. So for October, we have some spoopy books planned. So I did a little digging on Reddit and had some people tell me what the worst kind of horror books or spooky books they had ever read were. Got some really good recommendations, put the two best ones up for a vote, and then Chris and I talked about it. It seems like, let's see, Reddit user Lapwing Husk recommended Drawn to the Grave by Mary Ann Mitchell, and Reddit user Dick Dastardly recommended Crabs, the Human Sacrifice by Guy N. Smith. So we obviously, everyone wants us to read the Crabs book, so we're going to read the Crabs book. So for Halloween, for October, we're going to read Crabs, the Human Sacrifice by Guy N. Smith. And we're also going to read the second book in the House of Night series.
Ooh, we're coming back to some old stuff again.
Yes.
Do you remember much of what happened? All I remember was a hallway blowjob that was very, very talked about.
So long ago, for episode 2, we read the first book. It was the
second book we ever read.
We read the first book in the House of Night series, and it was basically like vampire, Harry Potter, weird teenage sex magic Native Americans.
It was Harry Potter Twilight.
Yeah.
Harry Twilight and the curse of the stupid face tattoo.
Oh, yeah, there are face tattoos. It was abominably bad. The episode, that's actually an episode that still exists, so you can listen to that one. It's up.
Yeah. Get caught up.
Yeah, so I guess there was somebody on Twitter, I think her name was Haley, who asked if we were going to read more of these, and I was like, yeah, we're thinking about it. So Haley, if you're listening, you got your wish. We're doing it. Your wish
has been granted by the
October.
Terrible Book gods. Terriblo.
Terriblo, yes. Terriblo heard your prayers and put the idea in our minds. Yeah, actually, that book was from the great pile o' books that Chris had from his music video shoot for his band. So, yeah, the book found its way to us thanks to Terriblo, the Terrible Book Club. Anyway, so that's the
Terriblo be praised.
Yeah, Terriblo be praised. That's the schedule for the rest of October. So we're gonna do House of Night book 2, then we're gonna do Crabs, the Human Sacrifice. So you got your traditional like sexy vampire stuff, and then we got fucking crabs with giant knives. So
should be good. I'm looking forward to these.
Yeah.
After this very serious one, I think we need some
levity.
laughs.
Yeah, we need some levity. So as a final note, remember to leave us a review on iTunes. Tell your book nerd friends or other friends who might like the show about it. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter. We have our Patreon if you're not a patron. And I'm usually around on some book and podcasting threads on Reddit, so you can usually find me there. Yeah, I think that's it. Chris, you got anything else?
That's it for me. No, that's it for me. We'll see you next time on this Terrible Book Club.
Yeah, we'll see you next time on this sandwich called the Terrible Book Club.
Yeah. You might have noticed. By the way, you might have noticed our slightly new format that we might be extending to other things.
Yeah.
We got a theme song now, kinda. I think.
Yeah, we I guess I forgot to talk about this at the beginning, but we're trying to create like our normal kind of opening and song for the beginning and end of the show that isn't a copyrighted work that we shouldn't be using. Oops.
Yeah.
Because I mean, all right, let's be real. Like, no one gives a shit about the show. We got like a couple hundred listeners. Like, it's not big enough for anyone to care about. So like, we were like, whatever. who cares? But now our fan base is growing. We kind of want to go on Spotify, so we're gonna fix the music problems. So yeah, hopefully the new intro sounds good. If you like it, let us know. If you hate it, let us know. If you're indifferent, also let us know, I guess. Or don't, because you're indifferent. So
if you hate it, maybe really let us know, because it'll be there forever.
yeah, that's true. Definitely
on everything, on every episode.
Yeah, like we're gonna go back through and edit them. So please tell us if the intro outro is awful. All right. With that being said, I'm looking forward to going back to the House of Night.
Me too. I'm ready for it, Paris.
All right, I'll meet you at the House of Night in 2 weeks, everybody.
All right. See you later, Paris.
See you, Chris.